Good evening, and welcome to Class 6, the final installment of the 6 Bardos. As you might remember from previous sessions, the previous sessions were all about disillusion. And with the Bardo of Dying, the disillusion is of the coarse and subtle elements, the coarse elements of the body and the subtle elements of consciousness. And it is the conceptual mind that is dissolving then into consciousness, and then consciousness itself dissolves into space. And then out of this bare awareness that results from that dissolution, the ground luminosity arises. And then from the ground luminosity, some people may experience that, and most people don't. And then out of the ground luminosity also, or after the ground luminosity could also be called luminosity with no appearances. And then next comes the Bardo of Dharmata, which is the luminosity with appearances. And so some people will be able to witness the procession for about 2 weeks in the Bardo of Dharmata of the peaceful and wrathful deities. But for most of us, almost everybody who dies who is not a realized being or a good practitioner anyway, all of these initial disillusions and experiences of the luminosity with appearances and without appearances go by in a flash. And so with the dissolution of consciousness into space, the black near attainment, then people will typically fall unconscious. And then most people, if they are unconscious during that experience of the near attainment, the black near attainment, then they will remain unconscious or miss the arising of the ground luminosity or the mother clear light. And so then they also will remain unconscious for the Bardo of Dharmata, and it said that can pass as quickly as the time that you recognize that you were falling down the stairway and the time that you hit the bottom. So the pithy way that Tibetans have of describing things in a very tactile way. So for most people then that die, and of course, so all people die, and for most people, when they die, they actually will be unconscious through all of the previous descriptions of what we've been talking about until they get to this point, the Bardo of Becoming, also called the karmic Bardo of Becoming. And this occurs during the period after you wake up from the faint that you fall into in the Bardo of Dharmata. And then right out, so that's the beginning of the Bardo of Becoming. And it ends then with conception in the mother's womb, just as you are embarking on your next rebirth. So this is the period then that for most people, we really want to place all of our attention and not sleep through this one. So we want to recognize everything as it's happening and try to take advantage of the opportunities that will present themselves and not be drawn by the force of karma into a rebirth that we wouldn't desire. So it is said that this experience of the Bardo of Becoming lasts approximately 7 weeks or 49 days. And by most accounts, the first half of the Bardo of Becoming is all about filled with the appearances of the life that we have just left. And then sometime about in the middle of that 7-week period, then there's a shift so that the appearances that are arising and what you are encountering will be signs of your next birth. And during the first weeks of the Bardo, then, when we are really more or less obsessing with the life that we have just left, typically the Bardo being doesn't even know that they have died. And so they will haunt their families and friends, and basically they have just awakened in this very confused state because they don't know how they got there, where they are, or what's happening. So it's a very this just awakening into a state where they have a sense of me that is still dependent on their picture of the body and mind that they left behind. Now they have no physical ground for that sense of me, but they still have the sense of me, and that is extremely confusing for the Bardo being and a source of great distress and fear and anxiety. And so they will wake up with this great confusion and return home. And they will see their families, their friends that they left at home, and they will tap them on the shoulder, try to get their attention, but nothing that they do will actually get the people that are there to recognize them, to notice them at all, and which is a further sense of confusion. And it is not until they actually realize that their image of themselves, their form, is actually a mental form rather than a physical form, and therefore it doesn't cast a shadow, there's no reflection in a mirror, and they leave no footprints in the sand or in the snow. And so they realize, finally, they come to this sudden realization that I am dead. I am no longer the physical being that I was. And that shock of recognition then really throws them into a sense of great fear, disorientation, and dread of the unknown. So it is important for friends and family then of the recently deceased to recognize that this Bardo being may be hovering around for some time. And so they can really then try with their, to create a positive atmosphere really filled with compassion and love for this being, and with the hope that they will create conditions that will help the Bardo being relax into their new state. And at first, this mental body will have a form of very similar to the body that they left behind when they died, or they will certainly have that identity. But the beautiful thing about the Bardo form, however, is that now the Bardo being the body is youthful and without any physical defects. So if a person died with a disability or just the disfigurement of old age, that they will be recognize themselves in this Bardo state for at least the first 2 weeks in their youthful prime. And so it's very important then to recognize that your setting of tone in the household that was left by the deceased is very critical for their initial experience through the Bardo. And you can imagine the experience because everything that a Bardo being experiences is with a consciousness that is about 7 times, and some texts say 10 times, more vivid and intense than our waking consciousness in this life. So there is great potential for both negative and positive experiences with this intense cognitive capacity in the Bardo. And so just imagine if the Bardo being comes back and the family is just putting together a memorial service based on feeling an obligation to do something and get it over with, or that they are squabbling about the possessions that they're trying to divide up, or that they are critical or in some way just trying to attack the person who is left behind or has left. How intense the agony of that could be for a Bardo being. So you really, for the family and friends of those who are gone, it's very important to be mindful of the potential presence of this being and that they are clairvoyant at this stage and can read your thoughts. So you have to be very careful. And in the Bardo of Becoming, we relive the experiences of our past life, reviewing in minute detail everything that has long been lost to memory. And we revisit places that are said in the terms of the masters where we did no more than spit on the ground. So you can imagine, exactly the intensity of this experience of your life review. And I have an appreciation for how intense that might be just from being in a one-year retreat and knowing how much time and the vividness and clarity of memories that arise in ways that I never experienced them before, and with a vividness of dreams rather than as memories. So it's quite a different experience that the Bardo being goes through in their life review. And all the negative karma of previous lives return in a fiercely concentrated and deranging way to consciousness because of this intensity of having a consciousness that is 7 times more intense than they were when the memories were actually created. So this Bardo is called the karmic Bardo of Becoming because, as Kalu Rinpoche says, it is an entirely automatic or blind result of our previous actions or karma, and nothing that occurs here is conscious decision on the part of the being. We are simply buffeted around by the force of karma. So all of your best intentions when you prepare for death may not add up to much in relation to the karma that you've created, actually, that is going to be propelling you. And this is called the karmic wind that is buffeting the mental body. And because of this karmic wind, the mental body is unable to remain still, even for an instant. And so it is just in constant motion. And because it is a mental body, it is able to travel distances at the speed of thought. And so if you think of New York City or Lhasa, you arrive there and instantly. And you also are able to pass through, because of your mental body, you are able to pass through solid walls and even mountains. And also in the Bardo of Becoming, there is no sun or moon to illuminate your travels through the Bardo, but there is only a dim light right in front of you that illuminates just this very, not a panoramic perspective, but just the area in front of you. And while you are on your journeys, you may encounter other Bardo beings as well, people who died just at the same time or just a little before you. And you can have some fleeting conversations with them, but that's about it. The experiences in the Bardo of Becoming that you're going to have as you are being buffeted by these karmic winds are all your the manifestations of your habitual patterns and the tendencies that you have created in this life. A mind created or that is habituated to negative thoughts and behaviors in this life, creating negative karma, is going to run into unpleasant or hostile experiences in the Bardo. And a mind habituated to positive, loving thoughts will experience pleasant and welcoming appearances in the Bardo. And also, it's important that at this time also, if your mind has been habituated during this life to the practice of deities, for instance, or to talking with Jesus and praying to Mary or whatever, even looking at statues and icons and tankas, that this also is going to have a very powerful effect at this stage in the Bardo. And it is said that at this time you may enter by just bringing to mind a deity that you are familiar with and habituated with, that you will view the mandala of the deity, and you might enter that sacred space then, and it's possible even to become enlightened then at this point in the Bardo, simply by especially being well prepared and habituated to that expression of deity in this life. And at the time then that your rebirth is drawing closer, so in the second half of this Bardo then, the Bardo being begins to crave more and more the support of a physical body and begins an active search for parents and a place to be born. About halfway through the Bardo of Becoming, the lights of the 6 realms begin to signal the approach of rebirth into one of the 6 states of samsaric existence. The wind of karma, which is the momentum of your habitual tendencies, will push the Bardo being towards a realm of rebirth that reflects his most dominant psychological tendencies. And lights of various colors from the 6 realms and lights of various colors shine from the 6 realms. And then once you are attracted to and enter into one of these lights that of representing the 6 realms, it's very difficult to turn back. It's like the suction of a black hole, it sounds like. And so the instruction at this time is to resist the impulse to merge with any of these alluring and familiar features of our habitual tendencies in the past when they express themselves as one of these comforting lights associated with each of the 6 realms. It's important to recognize that according to Mahayana and Vajrayana tenets, that the 6 realms are psychological states. These are not substantial places that you actually are going to go to as we travel from Annisquam to Danvers or something like that, or even across the country or across the ocean to a physical place. These are just expressions of psychological states that we become habituated to in this life. And so that it's important then to realize that the realms that we will encounter later and the lights and signs of the landscapes that we will encounter during this Bardo are created by us and experienced by us in the same way that we are experiencers and creators of this realm that we inhabit right now. Traditionally, there are 6 realms categorized into 3 higher and lower realms. The three higher realms are the god realms, the jealous gods, and the human realm. And the lower realms are the animal realm, the pretas or hungry ghosts, and the hell beings. It is each of these realms people are born into based on their karma. So positive karma, karma that leads to positive results, is what leads to the higher rebirths, and negative karma is what leads to rebirths in the lower realms. And the higher realms are characterized by greater degrees of freedom, less mental obscurity, and less suffering. And conversely, the lower realms, there is more suffering and greater obscurity and a feeling of no freedom whatsoever. All six realms, however, are within cyclic existence, and therefore even the highest realms that sound so enticing are within samsara and include some element of delusion and suffering. On the handout, you'll see a very brief description of a few characteristics of the six realms that include a color of lights that will manifest at this time and are what actually are attracting you to that realm. Some visions of landscape features that are associated with each of these realms, and a few of the qualities of these realms as well. And it's helpful to know what to expect and what these the lights of each realm actually are, so that you will know exactly what realm it is that is drawing you towards it, and hopefully be able to put on the brakes if it's even if it's a very alluring color, but it is drawing you to a lower rebirth. The white light that will appear to some people is associated with the God realm. And if you follow the white light of the God realm, you may see a magnificent celestial palace made of jewels as the sign of this realm. The gods in this realm enjoy what seems to be continual physical and mental bliss. These gods in this realm possess not only immeasurable wealth, but also the joy of perfect samadhi. Sounds really good, doesn't it? The lifespan in these realms also is exceedingly long by our standards, and it's said that one day in a God realm is equivalent to 100 years in human years. Therefore, it seems to these gods that they are immortal. However, for all the pleasure and apparent lack of suffering, the God realm is still a samsaric existence. And experience here is dominated by the mental affliction of pride, which develops naturally because they feel they have achieved the pinnacle of existence. But the gods of this realm are actually not immortal, and it is said that they foresee their time of death 1 week in advance, which would be equal to 700 years in human time. And this realization that they are about to die brings about experiences of terrible suffering. And it is said that when gods die, their suffering is so great it's like descending or dropping from heaven to hell. And they're, because of the fact that they are going to die, they are shunned by other gods, and they die alone and lonely and isolated. If the Bardo being is attracted to and follows the pale red light, she may see a ring of fire and feel she is entering a battlefield. These are signs that the birth of the realm of the jealous gods is impending. These jealous gods are also known as the realm of asuras or demigods. And although this is a higher realm, still with many positive advantages to it, it doesn't have the riches or the pleasures or the power of the god realms. And so the jealous gods are always in constant battle with the gods. And it always has catastrophic consequences for the jealous gods. Now, there's a great metaphor for the jealousy that is caused in this realm. It's said that the jealous gods plant and cultivate a wish-fulfilling tree that you just pluck the fruit and get whatever you could possibly want from it. And this tree grows up into the god realm, and the god realms pluck all the fruit while the jealous gods have to tend it. So they're really upset about all of this. And there's always a lot of thunder and lightning involved. If a Bardo being follows the pale blue light, she will have visions of grand mansions and crowded human cities, and this is a sign of taking rebirth in the human realm. The dominant mental affliction of the human realm is the mental affliction of attachment. And the experience in this realm is characterized by poverty mentality. No matter how bountiful the lives that we have, we feel unfulfilled and dissatisfied, and there is a pervasive sense of dissatisfaction that just underlies all of our experience. We feel that there is something missing in our lives, and so there is a resultant discontent and restlessness. So these are psychological descriptions of the state that we're going to be reborn into, and quite an apt description of our current experience also, isn't it? And even when we do get what we want and possess an object of our desire, our satisfaction with it is always fleeting in this realm. Eventually, the beauty of the object fades, its appeal diminishes, or it is lost or stolen, or it just wears out. Or it may even become an object of revulsion. Just everything is, our satisfaction in this realm is very fleeting, just doesn't last. Also, in the human realm, we experience degrees of all the 6 realms, and physically, emotionally, and mentally. So it is possible to experience some of the bliss of the God realms and also the suffering of hell realms. And of course, people of different karma in this human realm will be specialists in either suffering or joy or bliss or pleasure. And it is the human realm, if we have a choice, or if we must be reborn, and we realize that we are going to be reborn and we have a choice, the human realm is the one that we should choose. Because this is the realm in which we actually can make, and the only realm in which we can make spiritual progress. Because for a number of reasons, there are tantric explanations for that. And also the explanation that our pleasure and our suffering is neither too great or too little, so that we actually can be motivated by the pleasure and pain to make progress on our spiritual path. And if the Bardo being follows the pale green light, he may see appearances such as an empty valley, a cave, or a hut, which leads to rebirth in the animal realm, which is the first of the lower realms. This realm is dominated by the mental affliction of ignorance. Ignorance doesn't mean that there is no intelligence whatsoever, or that the animals are terribly stupid, but that they just lack a self-awareness and a capacity for critical self-reflection. And so because of that, the animals in this realm, their survival is constantly threatened by predators, and so their protective instincts rule their behavior. If the Bardo being follows a pale yellow light, she may see a pile of logs or a jungle, which leads to rebirth in the realm of hungry ghosts or pretas. The preta realm is dominated by the mental affliction of greed, which is expressed as miserly clinging to all possessions of any kind, even psychological states. Traditional Buddhist paintings in tankas depict these pretas as having huge bellies with needle-thin throats and tiny mouths, and so that they have an insatiable appetite and are always craving to have food or drink. And no matter what they consume, even if they are able to consume it, they can't get it past the tiny mouths and needle-like throats to actually satisfy their appetites. Sounds like something possessing our country right now. And if the Bardo being follows the dark, foggy light, she may see a dungeon, a hole in the ground, or a metallic city, and be led to rebirth in the hell realm. The hell realm is dominated by the mental affliction of hostility or aggression, and is expressed as anger. A hell being's habitual defense against any perceived threat is aggression, and there's a sense of ongoing friction in relationships. They are engulfed by anger that fuels hateful verbal and physical violence. That complete state of hatred is the definition of hell. And in Buddhist literature, there are pages and pages and chapters of the suffering of these hell realms. And it is really described as an unrelenting state of suffering where beings are either burned or boiled and subjected to bitter cold. So there are hot hells and cold hells. And while these depictions and descriptions of the hell realms are not to be taken literally, they do really graphically portray the psychological trauma of these hell realms. I remember Robert Thurman one time said that he was asked by someone, "Are these hell realms real, or are they just psychological states?" And Thurman replied, "They're just psychological states. But that shouldn't give you any comfort, because if you believe that these appearances of this life are real, you'll believe that the appearances of the hells are real as well." It is taught that, swept along by the wind of karma, you will arrive at a place where your potential parents are having sex, which arouses in you intense jealousy or attachment. And if your karma propels you in their direction and you blindly follow them, you will be reborn in whichever realm they are living in at that point. And that could be an auspicious or an inauspicious birth. It could be loving parents, for instance, that have a spiritual practice and can support you in your aspirations as you grow up. Or it could be dogs mating. And because of the blindness of your desire, you wouldn't necessarily know which is which, but you would just follow, based on this desire, whichever light is attracting you based on your karmic predispositions, rather than what you know you should be doing or would like to do. And it is said that if you are going to be reborn as a male, you will feel attachment for the mother and jealousy towards the father, and just the opposite. If you will be reborn as a woman or a female, you will be attached to the father and feel jealousy towards the mother. And in either case, then, the jealousy and attachment arise together, and you fall deeper and deeper into a state of ignorance until you don't know who you are or where you are. Is there anything at this point, then, that can point that you can do at this point to avoid being reborn altogether in samsaric existence? Or if you are going to be reborn, to direct yourself, your rebirth, to one that will have favorable circumstances? The Bardo teachings first offer advice for what is called closing the womb, or closing the entrance to birth altogether. And the best way is to practice what we were practicing in the Bardo of meditation, and that is to abandon mental afflictions such as attachment, anger, and jealousy, and recognize that none of these Bardo experiences have any ultimate reality. So this is the advice that is repeated throughout in all of the Bardos, to recognize exactly what the nature of mind and the nature of appearances really is, and that is the empty luminosity of the ultimate nature of mind itself. As the Tibetan Book of the Dead instructs at this point, alas, the father and mother, the great storm, the whirlwind, the thunder, the terrifying projections, and all these apparent phenomena are illusory in their real nature. However they appear, they are not real. So by recognizing the nature, we can actually close the door of rebirth altogether. And at the very least, we can slow the process and allow a degree of mindfulness that will allow us to examine the qualities of the parents and the place where we may live or go, to determine how that will support our practice of Dharma in the future. But the problem with waiting until this point to become mindful of your experience is that unless you have previous experience in training the mind, a well-developed shamatha practice that is, focusing at this juncture is going to be really difficult for you. This is why the core instruction in the Tibetan Book of the Dead is repeated over and over again, and that is, do not be distracted. And as it points out, this is the dividing line where Buddhas and sentient beings are separated. If we don't try to take charge and direct the experience, we are drawn towards one of these lights, and our next birthplace as inexorably as a bird lured into a cage, dry grass catching fire, or an animal sinking into a marsh. Even though you do not want to go, you have no power of your own. You are helpless and compelled to go. Yet, as the teachings are always reminding us, there is always hope. And now is the time for prayer. By wishing and concentrating intensely, even at this moment, you can still be reborn in one of the Buddha realms, which would be an extraordinary outcome considering you are just on the verge of being born into a samsaric, uncontrolled rebirth. It really is the shifting and precarious nature of the Bardo of Becoming that can actually be the source of many opportunities for liberation in this realm and during this time. In the Bardo of Becoming, the Buddha realms don't manifest themselves spontaneously like they did in the Bardo of Dharmata, but if you bring them to mind, they will appear. Just by remembering them, you can transfer yourself, it's said, directly to them by the power of your mind and continue your path towards enlightenment. It is said that if you can invoke a Buddha, he will immediately appear before you. If you don't attain enlightenment in the Bardos, so in the Bardo of becoming enlightened in the Dharmakaya by recognizing the clear light of death, or the becoming enlightened in the Sambhogakaya by recognizing the luminosity in the Bardo of Dharmata, then you can become enlightened. It's possible to become enlightened in the Bardo of Becoming, which would be becoming enlightened in the Nirmanakaya. But if you don't become enlightened in any of these three ways, then the next best thing is to become, to travel actually to rebirth in a Pure Land. These Pure Lands are not yet in nirvana, but they are outside of samsara. They're free from aging, sickness, and death of samsaric existence. Spiritual progress is accelerated in a Pure Land, and once you're born into a Pure Land, you'll never fall back into samsara unless you choose to do so. Birth into a Pure Land is your last rebirth before attaining enlightenment. So this is really the great opportunity of this realm, of the Bardo, of this Bardo, the Bardo of Becoming, is to actually become, to choose a rebirth in a Pure Land. If in this life you have developed the natural reflex of praying whenever things get tough or are out of control, you will be able to invoke or call to mind an enlightened being at this point, such as Buddha or Padmasambhava, or Jesus or the Virgin Mary as well. If you invoke them fervently with one-pointed devotion and with all your heart, then through the power of their blessing, your mind will be liberated into the space of their wisdom mind. Of all the Pure Lands of all the Buddhas, the one most accessible to most of us at this point, and at this last chance before rebirth, is Sukhavati, the land of bliss. This is the Pure Land of the Buddha Amitabha. Sukhavati is generally regarded as the only Pure Land where ordinary beings like ourselves can be reborn. Lama Allen calls Sukhavati the proletariat's Pure Land because all of the other Pure Lands have a very high admission standard. Meaning that you have to have had an experience of the direct perception of emptiness and proceeded on to the first bhumi at least to get past St. Peter at these Pure Lands. But Sukhavati is open to any of us, even though we are still mentally afflicted sentient beings. Machik Lapdran, who is one of the great Tibetan yoginis, regarded as a reincarnation of Yeshe Tsogyal, wrote, Sukhavati is superior to the realms of other Buddhas in these ways. It is greater because it is possible for ordinary individuals with mental afflictions to be born there. And if you take birth there, all that you wish for is accomplished as soon as you think of it. You are not tainted by even subtle mental afflictions, and you may go from there to the realms of other Buddhas. What good is it to be born there? There is no suffering in taking birth in that realm, for your body is instantly brought forth in miraculous birth in the midst of a flower. Everyone without exception who is born there has a golden-colored body, adorned with the signs and symbols of enlightenment, and possesses incalculable extrasensory perception and paranormal abilities. In that realm, you never even hear of the sufferings of illness, harmful spirits, enemies, famine, and so on. Whoever is born there is without the 5 poisons of attachment, hatred, delusion, pride, and jealousy. Without needing to experience the suffering of the ripening of all your present sins and obscurations, they are purified by encountering Amitabha, making prostrations, circumambulations, and offerings and listening to the Dharma. Due to your unimpeded supernormal powers and extrasensory perception, you may go to all the Buddha realms, meet the Buddhas, listen to Dharma, and with these connections serve as a guide to sentient beings. This is by going to Sukhavati for the, as one of the proletariat, you can actually get a lateral transfer there to the other Buddha realms, even though you wouldn't have qualified to go there directly. And so Lama Allen very humbly has said this is his plan. That he has a very detailed plan that he has laid out when he teaches Sukhavati and where he plans to go and do and who he plans to study with once he gets there. And it's very humble in the same way that Gyatro Rinpoche was very humble when he said, Gyatro Rinpoche being Lama Allen's Dzogchen teacher and my grandfather, Dzogchen teacher, I guess, who said that when he died, he knew he would be so scared that he'd probably poop his pants. And he rested in Tukdam for 30 days. So humble like that, I think Lama Allen has Sukhavati as his backup plan. But you're not going to be able to, some people think, and I have often questioned this myself, is this just some sort of a myth that is just too easy of a way out? That, this can't be true, that you can just go through all of the Bardos, miss all of your opportunities, and then just by bringing Amitabha to mind, that you will go to his pure realm? Well, I think the point is that there are practices that you can do now while you're alive that actually are going to make that a lot more likely. And if you don't have any relationship at all with Amitabha at this point in your life, that it's very unlikely that he would even come to mind while you are at that point right on the verge of being reborn. So if you have this backup plan and you are practicing now to take advantage of that opportunity when it arises in the Bardo of Becoming, then there's a chance that that actually will be an available alternative to you. And one of the ways that you can cultivate this relationship with Sukhavati and Amitabha now is with the practice of the Dzogchen preliminaries as transmitted by Dujam Lingpa in this tradition of Dujam Rinpoche's Tursar and coming through Gyatro Rinpoche and Lama Allen. And at the end of the particular text that I practice and have for 4 years or so, almost every day, there is a POA practice. And with this POA practice, there's an extensive one and a short one, but POA means transfer of consciousness. And with this particular recitation practice, you have an opportunity to become familiar with the appearance and the features of Amitabha and of Sukhavati itself, and then to launch yourself into this Pure Land. It's said as if you are an arrow shot by a strong archer. And if you practice this, then you will be planting seeds that will hopefully ripen then when you have the opportunity in the Bardo of Becoming to recognize the Pure Lands. And it's curious that even though in most of my Buddhist practice and training, I hadn't heard anything at all about Sukhavati, that among Nyingma lamas, especially anyway, that this is a highly recommended practice. And so when Andrew Holacek, for instance, was doing research for his book, Preparing to Die, he interviewed a number of Tibetan lamas who were Dzogchen and Bardo teachers. And so, for instance, he asked Trangu Rinpoche, who is one of the greatest Mahamudra masters and teaches a lot on the Bardos as well, what would he recommend that a Buddhist who had just given a diagnosis of 1 year to live, what should that Buddhist be doing as their main practice? And what he said was POA, Pure Land practice. And then there are interviews with probably 20 or so other lamas in his book. And it's surprising the number of them who really emphasize the Pure Land practice. And of course, the one that most of them reference mostly is Sukhavati. So it is possible with this practice of Sukhavati, or the recognition of the potential there anyway, at the last moment to escape samsaric rebirth. But the difficulty of focusing the mind at this juncture may lead us to be overwhelmed by the karmic winds and be oblivious to this last opportunity. When you see your father and mother in intercourse, your mind is ineluctably drawn in and enters the womb. This signals the end of the Bardo of Becoming. As your mind rapidly experiences the phases of disillusion that occurred during the dying process, but now in reverse, with the dawning of the ground luminosity, then the unconsciousness of the black near attainment, and then the following moment, the connection of the new womb is made with the white element of the father and the red element of the mother. And your Bardo being consciousness then enters this union of the white and red elements. And then you embark on the Bardo of living all over again and continue another cycle of existence. Even this basic introduction that I have given you over these 6 weeks may be enough for you to have a decisive understanding of these teachings. But for them to have any real value for you in this life and in what happens after death, it is really necessary to put them into practice. We should stop what we're doing right now and remember impermanence and prepare ourselves for death. When will our death come? It could be tomorrow. It could be today. One of the beautiful teachings in the Lam Rim that has stuck with me ever since I read it was, what comes next? The bottom of this cup of tea or my next life? So if we really take that attitude, we will be prepared for death when it arrives, whenever that is, and we must be prepared for that 24 hours a day. Mind endures because it is unborn and unceasing. It transcends our concepts of time and space. At some point, we will recognize that mind also transcends death. Who we are and where we are is mind. In the Bardo of Becoming, we are completely exposed to whatever habits and tendencies we have allowed to grow and to dominate in our lives. If we don't take charge of those habits and tendencies now, in the Bardo of Becoming, you will be their helpless victim. The example of our greatest teachers encourages us to use every moment, every opportunity in a way that is beneficial for ourselves and for others. If we live every moment fully aware, in a positive, peaceful, and kind way, death will be the same, just another of those unceasing moments. And so we have concluded the Bardo of Becoming and are back to the Bardo of Life. Let's do a meditation. So take a moment to stretch, get comfortable, find a comfortable position. This will be just a 12-minute meditation. Begin by settling your body, speech, and mind in their natural states. Settle the body in its natural state of relaxed ease, stillness, and vigilance. Settle the breath in its natural state or speech in its natural state by allowing breath to find its own rhythm, giving up all control of it. And release all distracting thoughts, images, impulses on the exhalation, allowing the speech to settle into its natural state of effortless silence. And settle the mind in its natural state by releasing all thoughts of the past, of the future, and resting simply in the present, fresh, now. And as you rest simply in the present, watch your thoughts from a state of stillness. Watch them arise. Watch them as they are present for some time. And watch them as they dissolve again. They self-release. And as you watch these thoughts arise, simply ask yourself, how does this thought reveal my mental habits? How does this thought reveal my mental habits? And how will this habit determine my experience in the Bardo of Becoming and what I experience after death? Bring the mindfulness to bear on your experience right now that you will need during the Bardo of Becoming. To take charge of your experience, to not be buffeted by karmic winds. What does this thought reveal about my mental habits? And how will this habit change my experience of the Bardo, for better or worse? And now as you, from this still point of awareness, watch the movement of thoughts as they arise, abide for some time, and then self-liberate. Find the gap between the end of one thought and the beginning of another. And rest in that empty luminosity. This is the ultimate Bardo. there any questions about anything we've covered in the last 6 weeks? Yes, Minnie.
Yes, which Bardo did you say was in the space? Just at the end of the meditation.
So that is general. So Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoche calls that ultimate Bardo, meaning that Bardo in general is regarded as a transition process. And so in the very beginning, I described how relative Bardo is actually these 6 Bardos that have a distinct beginning, duration, and then end. So those are all of the 6 Bardos would be then in Dzogchen Ponlop's figuring then would be relative Bardo. But he is always really encouraging and demanding that we regard every moment of experience as the potential for liberation, and that we are going to find the true nature of our minds then in this gap between the appearances, when all that we find there is empty luminosity and non-dual emptiness and luminosity, which we have been aiming at a realization of or an experience of with our practice in the Bardo of meditation.
I'm confused as to what's the witness of what we're supposed to be seeing, and the other thing I realized you were saying to actually see some of these things is to fine-tune our shamatha and get things settled down. So that's my gig for a while. I'm going back to beach meditation and things like that.
Yeah. So who is the subject, basically,
or the witness,
through the Bardos?
or the reporter of these states that you were talking about in the Bardos?
So who is the experiencer of the Bardo?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. So this would be the consciousness that is traveling after death. So, and the point is that even though physical death occurs and mind is separated from the body, mind continues beyond death, and mind, because of its non-dual nature of emptiness and luminosity, you could say the luminous quality of that continuing awareness is always producing appearances. And so it is producing appearances in the Bardo according to this schema of 6 different, a progression of or after death anyway, 3 experiences. And then is there a subject who is distinct from the experiences, is the question. So is there a subject who is self-existent, who is traveling through and viewing these experiences? Or so when we recognize that the appearances that are appearing to me in the Bardo are not external appearances appearing to a self-existent subject, what is the natural conclusion then? That there is no distinction between subject and object. When you are, remember in Vipassana practice, when we are aiming to recognize the luminosity and emptiness of appearances, we then use the emptiness and luminosity of appearances to recognize the emptiness and luminosity of the, quote, subject mind as well. and recognize that there is no distinction between external and internal.
All right, thank you.
And
I'm a fledgling.
So this is your shamatha practice is going to lead you to have longer and longer gaps, right, between the appearances. And then it all just becomes very experiential. It's no longer theoretical or a matter of language.
And you're living it, actually. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so you have, for one, a referent for knowing what pristine awareness actually means. It is that non-dual luminosity and emptiness. And then, so it's said that primordial consciousness or pristine awareness has an essential nature of emptiness, a manifest nature of luminosity, and an all-pervasive nature of compassion. The Nirmanakaya.
That's what the gold that shows up.
Can you hold the mic up a little bit?
That's what the gold that shows up, sort of.
Well, that's what
when we're recognizing what we're.
Yeah. So you will.
The conceptuality.
Your trip through the Bardo will end in rebirth into a hopefully favorable circumstance again in a human realm. But if you are buffeted by karma, what is the reason that you have no control of these karmic winds? Why is it that you would be helpless, actually, and just blown wherever your karmic winds are going to determine that you go? What is the supreme antidote for that? Anybody want to venture Exactly. Yeah. And so and the response was to recognize the emptiness of it all. And so in that emptiness, so you are seeing the empty nature of whatever is appearing to you. And so in the moment then that you recognize the nature of what's happening in any of these Bardo states, the Bardo ends and you become enlightened in the Bardo. And just, I think it's a little, it's really enticing and encouraging and compelling to think about the power of the mind when it is separated from the body, and the intensity of our cognitive abilities, and how, being able to travel to another universe even at the speed of thought. And, is that just a myth or fiction, or is that an actual capacity? And just imagine then what is the capacity for realization in the Bardo if we really take advantage of it. And that's what really in my preparation for this 6 weeks of teachings really stood out to me, is that the conceptual mind, which, remember the filtering model or the transmission model, there is a vast consciousness outside of what the brain limits, so that we are able to, by just dealing with icons of perception, to be well adapted to surviving on this planet Earth. And then the question is, what is the nature of that vast consciousness before it is filtered by the brain? And then we get actually in the Bardos, we actually have a chance, because the mind is no longer constrained by the physical body, that we actually have a chance to experience, if we are prepared to witness it If we're not, it just goes by in one flash after another. But if we are able to take advantage of that, then we see directly what that nature of mind is before it's filtered by the brain. And we find that in the gaps.
I sometimes feel that I'm missing, it's there, but I'm missing it.
The gaps?
Yeah.
Yeah, so shamatha practice will take care of that. You know, you first, the four modes of mindfulness of Dujam Lingpa, you first recognize the difference between stillness and motion, and then recognize the simultaneous nature of stillness and motion. But you are able to, as you're developing that stillness and motion, you're able to view the appearances, which are motion, from this perspective of stillness, and then you recognize when they're there, when there's motion and when there's not. Yeah, Brett?
Just in terms of talking about the gap, I'm curious about the ability to simultaneously have attention and awareness and balancing that with stillness and motion, or do they parallel? Having the idea of simultaneously having two cognitive states take place. If I frame that question
So
correctly.
attention versus awareness,
Right.
first of all.
And noticing the gap.
Yeah. So attention is always selective, exclusive, and focused on one thing. And you arrive at a focused attention by exclusion of everything else other than what is your chosen object of attention. So you first of all direct your attention to a chosen object and then train to sustain your attention where you have placed it. So that's developing or using shamatha with a sign, but you are, you're working with attention in that regard. But and that a large part of Buddhist practice focuses on that aspect of training attention to develop stillness and single-pointedness. But Dzogchen and Mahamudra are really, maybe not unique, but powerful in their emphasis of awareness, using awareness. And so awareness is open and not exclusive. It's global. And so it's able to perceive relationships between things rather than just the things themselves.
But it seems almost like I have attention towards awareness, of awareness. That the noticing of awareness is based on an attention practice.
I don't think so. Yeah. So I think that awareness and attention are two different elements, and that you can have awareness in which attention is operating, but you wouldn't have attention of awareness because it is a smaller exclusive capacity. But and the gap then, you could train with attention to develop that single-pointedness, and then the single-pointedness, or the calming of the mind, so that it becomes peaceful, serene, and that just the waterfall, as it's described, the torrent of thought, begins to slow down and then eventually become individual moments of thought rather than just an unrelenting torrent. And it's then when your mind becomes peaceful in that way that you are able to see the true arising and abiding and dissolution then of an individual moment of thought. And then it's when you see that all three of those, the full life cycle of a mental appearance, that you can then see the end of one before the beginning of another and the gap between them. And that would be awareness.
I find it interesting the way you're describing attention and awareness. I have heard a similar description of the left brain and the right brain. Is there some correlation, or is this just a coincidence?
I don't think it's a coincidence. The best descriptions of the difference between attention and awareness that I know of come from the great Oxford scholar Ian McGilchrist, who uses the left brain versus right brain lateralization to describe the difference in perceiving reality between those two. So left brain is definitely attention, because what is the experience of the left of the left brain is representation and turning living experience into something conceptual that is bound and can be described and defined, and therefore communicated and verified and exists beyond time or across time, because it is a dead, lifeless, mechanical thing rather than a living process, which would be the province of the right hemisphere. But I used to talk about that aspect of the brain experience a lot more, but I try to avoid that now because of just it's a little too confusing and leads to a materialist experience and understanding, I think, of mind.
Thank you.
Do you have a second question?
I don't have no, I don't have a second question. Do you have a question?
I'll ask a question. Can you share how you know about the experience in the Bardo? How we know about the experience?
Oh, so the source, so I think that was part of the power of what Lindsay read to us. These are, first of all, most of the Bardo teachings come from Padmasambhava in the Nyingma tradition. And Padmasambhava is somebody who obviously realized these teachings and it's said achieved the full transference rainbow body and disappeared, left this realm on a sunbeam, called the second Buddha by many Tibetans. So he's the origin, and so he gave these teachings then to King Trisong Dutsen, I believe it was, and then to Yeshe Sogyal, who then transcribed the teachings, and then they were hidden as termas and then discovered by Karma Lingpa later. So that's the textual source. But what Lindsay was reading then was a contemporary experiential realization of those texts. So I think there are, I think, hundreds and hundreds of volumes probably of commentarial experiential descriptions of these original Terma teachings. And these are people, I think, that great teachers who have realized the text, and then been able to control their rebirth, so, and also control their experience through the Bardos, so they're conscious through the whole thing. And then if you were able to do that, then you would be like able to, like Magyar Rinpoche did, to write a very lucid and eloquent account of what that experience was like, and verifying that experience. But it is all also so consistent with our experience of mind while we are alive as well. And so there's a tremendous internal consistency and coherence in these theories of mind that give tremendous credibility, I think, to the conceptual teachings, because they are all based on things that you can experience in this life, like the luminous empty nature of mind in the gap. And then as you develop further in your meditation practice, that it just all makes perfect sense. So logically and experientially, and then I guess you could say scripturally, are the sources for these Bardo teachings.
And would the Pure Land of Amitabha be where bodhisattvas would reside?
Well, you would definitely could become a very bodhisattva very quickly in Sukhavati. You would probably be a bodhisattva, a degree of bodhisattva, anyway, on one of the bhumis before going to any of the other Pure Lands of the other Buddhas. And then I think one of the great motivations, obviously, for anybody wanting to go to Sukhavati is so that they could attain enlightenment very quickly then, because your progress is really accelerated then in just being surrounded by Buddhas and being able to ask them questions, and your state of clairvoyance as well. So that then you would, your whole motivation for doing that would be undoubtedly, or very likely, to return to the Bardo of living again, so that you could really pass on what you learned. Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have to preach in a couple of weeks on a parable of Jesus doing a miraculous healing of a woman who was bent over from the waist for her entire life. And he's in the temple and she walks by him and he reaches out and touches her and she's healed. And I keep thinking of it in light of what we're talking about. How does the consciousness of enlightened being pass on? In other words, it seems to me that it has to be the understanding of the emptiness of the person being healed and the emptiness of the disease. How is that transferred to the object that you see, that he sees?
How is
the miracle?
Jesus or a siddha
Right.
able to actually affect
Right,
physical reality in a sense?
right.
I think it is because physical reality doesn't exist in the way that we perceive it to, as discrete, solitary things, but in the way that Ian McGilchrist describes them, as a continual process rather than as things. And it is only the conceptual mind of attention that turns a process, a living process without any boundaries, into discrete things. And so I'm just guessing that a being, a siddha, and somebody who is, an extraordinary, the Son of God, Jesus, would be able to recognize the true nature of reality, see that there is no ultimate boundary between him and the person being healed. So the emptiness of Jesus, the emptiness of the woman, and the emptiness of the illness, just as you said, and just be able to work with that in the same way that water is not by nature liquid and flowing, but we perceive it to be that way, and that it's possible that water could also support someone walking across it. But you have to see the nature of reality in order to pull something like that off.
The three spheres.
The three spheres, yeah.
Yeah, which would be a good practice in our daily life to constantly be remembering
Yeah,
the
exactly.
emptiness of the person, the act, and the receiver.
Yeah,
It's all empty.
exactly.
What do we believe becomes of folks who have not had the good fortune to be exposed to these teachings, or those of us who are incapable of doing the preparation and following through?
Well, all people will die. All people will go through the dissolution process of the coarse elements of the body, the subtle 80 thoughts dissolving into consciousness. Consciousness will dissolve into space. So everybody will go through that process, but then everything is really individualized after that. And so whether all people will, end up in the black near attainment becoming unconscious. And then the question is, do they remain, some people, advanced practitioners, will actually remain lucid through that stage. But most people will become unconscious then, and then stay unconscious until this Bardo of Becoming. So somebody who is totally untrained or not prepared, very likely will just go through the experiences of what we have described today. And the Bardo of, so the clear light of death and the Bardo of Dharmata with the peaceful and wrathful deities, the luminosity with appearances, they wouldn't even recognize. It would, pass like that. But they would still then, so they would then, all beings then who make it through those, or don't make it through, they don't recognize the luminosity with appearances or the luminosity without appearances, are going to end up in the Bardo of Becoming and then be buffeted by their karma. And so their karma then will determine what happens to them. And then they certainly wouldn't have any inkling of a pure realm or a pure land and any of the other possibilities of liberation in the Bardo of Becoming. And so they would be driven then by their karmic propensities created during this life and be attracted to one of those, the lights of the six realms.
So then, do we assume then it's to our advantage to have these teachings and to be able to prepare? Or is it just what will be, will be?
No. What will be is only if you're not preparing right now, or if you're content with whatever will be, will be. If you have an aspiration actually to see the nature of reality and to be authentically happy, then you will be preparing. But it's not as if you're preparing for something that's going to happen in the future. You're preparing to understand reality right now, moment to moment in this life. And so everything that you're doing that will take you through the Bardos and a successful outcome there is what you will need to do in this life to be authentically happy now and to not be ruled by your mental afflictions.
So I guess the answer is yes.
Yahoo, yes. Without a doubt.
6 classes later, yes.
So I think we talked about this earlier in the Bardo of Dying, but I'm curious about the dying person having instructions read to them about the dissolution, about the Bardos. I think I mentioned to you I found a recording by Laurie Anderson called Songs from the Bardos. And there's a beautiful kind of guided meditation there that she does. And I wonder if you could say anything about that, or if you know of in any of your teachers about them doing that practice for people, either when they're in the Bardo of Becoming or the Bardo of Dying or something to that effect, of a guided speaking to them.
Yeah, so the Tibetan Book of the Dead is a long, elaborate script that is intended to be read as instructions to the Bardo beings and to people as they are dying. So there are instructions actually on when to eject your consciousness from the body, etc., all the way through every stage of the Bardos. So this is the way that, obviously, for someone who has been introduced to these teachings, they can be reminded of the instructions then after they have passed by somebody that they have a close relationship to. And one of the big differences in the potential of these teachings then is that our forgetful, distracted mind in this life may have with its 7 times greater clarity in the Bardo, hearing these same instructions and being in that disembodied state then may have a much greater potential. Excuse me. The question, I think, is if someone hasn't been introduced to these teachings, is it still beneficial to read these instructions to them? And most lamas, I think, would say yes, because there is powerful blessing in the teachings themselves, in the Bardo instructions, and that you're probably not going to do any damage. Although I have seen also commentaries that say that if someone hasn't been exposed to these teachings, so first of all, if somebody has been introduced to the teachings, it's still very important that the person reading the instructions to them have a close relationship to the person, because even the sound of someone's voice can be very irritating if they are reading the instructions to a Bardo being, and they would be could have a violent reaction to even that because of the exaggeration of all responses in the Bardo, and that 7 times greater factor. So the question then is, if somebody is a devout Christian, for instance, would you read these instructions to them? And I think I would be hesitant to do that and respect this person's beliefs about, and rather than try to impose my belief system on somebody who is now helpless, to reject them or to refute them, or that I think that a Bardo being could react very negatively to someone preaching to them, basically about what they should be experiencing. But if somebody has been introduced to them, and especially if they have faith in these teachings, then I think the benefit would be great. But some of the practices I think transfer very, very well between different faiths and traditions and religions. And that, for instance, is the POA practice, the essential POA practice that I'm pretty sure we printed that in probably the second handout, which is Sogyal Rinpoche's essential POA. It's a very short practice that just basically helps the person to call to mind an enlightened being or somebody that they have respect for as a great teacher, and to just bask in their glow, and then to essentially eject their consciousness as a POA practice to merge with that being at death. And so that's very non-sectarian. And I think that has universal application. So things like that, if they can somehow be universalized, and that's actually what I have tried to do in these 6 teachings. I haven't referred all that much to the actual Bardo instructions that would be read, because they are so specific to this particular tradition and text. But I think what I have really hoped to do in these 6 classes is to just talk about the underlying process of what's going on in a manner of what's happening to consciousness and would be happening to all people.
Will we have another opportunity or so to see you again before you return to Colorado?
Oh, well, I won't be teaching anymore anyway, but I'll be around for a while, for a few weeks yet. Yeah, so, if you want to get together, we can have coffee or something.
In all of the mental understanding and preparation, is there ever any consideration of a feeling sense and not just sort of a mental knowing sense? Where does that come in? Just the feeling sense, the transmission of feeling and heartfulness in this process?
Well, feeling. So in Buddhist terminology, feeling means something very specific, which is the plus, minus, or zero response to everything that appears. But I don't think that's what you're referring to. I think you're talking about an emotional response.
Well, just beyond the mental considerations, sort of beyond that.
Well, I think everything, all of these appearances. So once I think what you're talking about, or what I'm taking it, is a distinction between conceptual and non-conceptual. And so the whole experience of conceptuality dissolves, the conceptual mind dissolves in the death process, very, very early during the death process, when after the coarse elements of the body have dissolved, that is the clinical death, but the subtle breath remains until subtle consciousness dissolves. And according to this schema, then, that is 80 innate thoughts that are dissolving into consciousness. So it is our entire conceptual mind and our capacity to have mental afflictions that is dissolving at that point. And so from that early point in the whole process, everything, our whole experience beyond that is non-conceptual at that point, which would be the ultimate of feeling, or direct experience, rather than represented conceptuality. So your whole capacity for that has dissolved before you actually, at the time that you enter the black near attainment. And after that, it's just pure non-conceptuality. It's, a mind that we can hardly, well, we do have experience of it, but, to be totally non-conceptual is quite, that is the power of everything that we experience in the Bardos. Yeah, is that it's direct. Well, I want to thank you all for being here and to give me the opportunity to sit here and discuss these things with you for 6 weeks. It's been a great pleasure, a great joy for me, and I have learned a tremendous amount in it. And I really want to thank, along with all of you, Lindsay and Rick, who have been my hosts here, and indispensable collaborators through all of the sessions, and and my good friends. So, as so many of you are, that it has made my summer here a great enjoyment and a great benefit for me, and I hope for you as well.